Hi, everybody. My name is Matthew Barnes, and I'm going to be presenting on how sleep affects mood. In order to do that, we're going to first need to define our terms. So, firstly, what is mood? Mood is a state of mind that determines one's emotional response to external stimuli that can change from day to day. Temperament also describes how someone will react to external stimuli and be confused for mood, but temperament is more closely tied to personality and is less subject to change than mood. Emotions are physiological and psychological responses to stimuli, and these are short term. They can respond to external stimuli as well as internal stimuli, such as thoughts. Mood and temperament have this relationship where your mood from day to day can either match your temperament or it cannot match your temperament. Let's say you're a pretty laid back person. If your mood is also laid back, then I would say that your mood matches your temperament. But from day to day, something happens and you're more aggravated one day. In that case, your mood would not match your temperament. So, next, how does mood affect our body? So it affects our body in a couple of ways. First is in psychological arousal. So arousal is simply your level of consciousness or wakefulness, and your mood can affect how alert you are and how ready you are to respond to stimuli. Okay, so if you're in a less than optimal mood, if you're in a not so good mood, this could make you more prone to stress, which will increase physiological responses such as heart rate, elevated blood pressure, your elevated respiratory rate, and an elevated perspiration rate. Now, the perspiration rate is more closely linked to fear and anxiety, but if you're going to be if you're in a poor mood, you're going to be more prone to stress, which has the physiological responses of elevated heart rate and blood pressure, which can have long-term medical effects that are not good. And so, next term we're going to need to define is sleep. Okay. Now, contrary to popular belief, sleep is not just your brain turning off like you would turn off a computer, okay? During sleep, your brain and body are working hard to repair any physical damages sustained during the day, as well as processing memories and maintaining homeostasis, okay? Now, for this presentation, when I say sleep, I'm going to refer to all stages of sleep, okay? There are different stages of sleep that you go through in cycles throughout the night. But when I say sleep, I'm going to mean that entire nighttime of sleep cycles. Okay. I mentioned that word homeostasis. So homeostasis is your body's baseline, which is balanced, for physiological processes to take place effectively in its environment. Okay, and here's what that means. So there are a lot of processes that your body has to do to stay alive, like producing ATP, shedding dead skin cells, recycling your blood, and all that stuff has to work on proteins which function at an optimal level, both an acidity level and a temperature level. And so your body needs to maintain this homeostasis, which is a combination of all those factors that have been set to a certain amount of parameters. So if your body, let's say you have an elevated temperature, you're not in homeostasis at that point because your temperature is above the normal parameter. If we're breaking down the word for you to understand it more, homeostasis, you kind of see the word homo in there, which means same. And stasis is like state. Okay, so it's going to kind of mean same state. Your body wants to stay in a same state in order to continue producing the chemicals it needs to live as well as energy. Okay, so you've probably heard it said that you spend about 1/3 of your life sleeping. This means that if you die at 80 years old, about 26 years of your life were spent sleeping. So if somebody was born and only lived when you were asleep, they would be 26 years old when you died. That's a pretty crazy fact right there. Sleep is extremely, extremely important. I see up here in this third bullet point. Especially it's important for your pivotal growth and development years, such as infancy and teenage puberty, okay? So infants obviously have a lot of growing to do. They need to become energy independent, okay? They need to be able to not rely on their mother for their food. In order to do that, they're going to need to sleep a lot in order to develop those physical coordination, the mental coordination, all that stuff. And prepubescent and pubescent teenagers are going to have to get more sleep in order for their body to undergo the changes that it's going to start. So next is how sleep affects the body. Okay, we're going to talk about two ways. First of all, during normal sleep, what does your body do during normal sleep, and then what is it going to do in sleep deprivation cases? So during normal sleep, your body is going to maintain that homeostasis. You're going to have your balanced chemical levels and hormone levels as well as temperature levels, and it's also going to help. Having normal sleep is also going to aid your body the next day in maintaining homeostasis by balancing those hormone levels. When you wake up after normal amounts of sleep during the day, you're going to perceive normal amounts of energy levels. Okay, so not anything more, hopefully not anything less, but if you receive a normal average amount of sleep, you're going to perceive that you have a normal amount of energy levels. Okay, and during normal sleep, after normal sleep, you're going to find that your mood is going to closely match your temperament. So remember when I said that temperament is closely linked to personality and mood is more short-term, day-to-day, month-to-month. Okay, so your mood is going to closely match your temperament if you get regular sleep levels. Okay, so in sleep deprivation cases, okay, your homeostasis is going to be thrown out of whack. Okay, here's what that means. You're going to have unbalanced levels of hormones, chemicals. You're going to have unbalanced levels of precious metals floating around in your blood. Throughout that next day, you're going to feel fatigued, and this fatigue is going to make you more prone to stress. And that stress we talked about has a number of physiological responses, such as elevated heart rate, elevated blood pressure, elevated respiration rate, and elevated perspiration rate. Okay? And those things are going to have a negative effect long-term on your health, right? Then in sleep deprivation cases, you're going to find that your mood and temperament are not going to match as closely as they usually would. So let's say your temperament is laid back. In a case where you are sleep deprived, your mood might change to be aggravated, right? Even though your temperament is laid back, you might be more aggravated during the day because of the sleep deprivation. So moving on, what parts of the brain are responsible for mood? It's going to primarily be this thing called the limbic system. Okay, now the limbic system is comprised of the hypothalamus, the hippocampus, the amygdala, the limbic cortex. I'm sorry, I have amygdala on there twice. We can just ignore that. But first, we're going to talk about the hypothalamus. Now, the hypothalamus regulates emotional responses. The amygdala is responsible for controlling emotional responses, as well as emotional coordination throughout different parts of your body regarding external stimuli. The limbic cortex impacts mood, your motivation, and impacts your judgment also. Now, what parts of the brain are responsible for sleep? We're going to start noticing that some of the parts of the brain between sleep and mood are going to be the same. And this is going to be important, okay? So, again, it's going to be the hypothalamus, your brainstem, your thalamus, cerebral cortex, the pineal gland, and your basal forebrain, okay? So your hypothalamus, as I mentioned earlier, regulates emotional responses, also arousal, and contains the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which receives light information directly from your eyes and controls your behavioral rhythm. Okay, so under that bullet point I have the SCN. That's the abbreviation for the suprachiasmatic nucleus. Okay, and that's going to come into play here when we look at the pineal gland, all right? So the brainstem communicates with the hypothalamus to control transitions between wake and sleep, okay? The thalamus and the cerebral cortex, they're going to work together to determine whether or not you should be awake and alert about your surroundings or whether it's time to start winding down and going to sleep, okay? The pineal gland. So the pineal gland receives signals from the SCN, remember the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and increases the production of the hormone melatonin, which is used to help you, kind of slip into unconsciousness, okay, during sleep time. Now, if your suprachiasmatic nucleus is communicating with your pineal gland that there's a lot of light going on around you, your pineal gland is not going to produce the melatonin you need to fall asleep, okay? So next is the basal forebrain. And this is more like a region of the brain rather than a specific part of the brain, and they communicate with the midbrain in regards to arousal. So the basal forebrain is a region of the front base of the brain and regulates wakefulness and communicates with the midbrain to regulate arousal. So your basal forebrain, your midbrain, and your brainstem, they're all going to be communicating together to determine arousal, as well as your SCN, your pineal gland, to determine whether or not it's time to go to sleep, okay? So moving on, how does sleep affect mood? So now we're getting into the main source of this presentation, okay? So first of all, we're going to look at fatigue and stress. I discussed earlier that when you're fatigued, you're going to be more prone to stress. And this is going to do things like elevate your blood pressure, elevate your heart rate, your respiration rate, as well as your perspiration rate. And all these physiological things are also going to affect your mood and temperament. So when you're going to have this elevated levels of heart rate, blood pressure, all that stuff, you're going to be more prone to anxiety, right? And your mood is not going to match your temperament. If your mood doesn't match your temperament, let's say you're a laid-back person, you might be more aggressive during the daytime if you didn't get enough sleep. And so those are kind of the physiological ways in which lack of sleep will affect your mood. And that being said, if your mood is not matching up with your temperament, this kind of stress center can cause you to feel a lot of negative emotions during the day. So some things that wouldn't normally make you upset in your normal day-to-day might actually make you upset. So let's say just your coworker does something annoying. Let's say that they're just opening a chip bag and that noise is making you really irritated, okay? In normal circumstances, when you've got normal sleep, that might not upset you that much that your coworker is being loud. But in this case, if you don't have a lot of sleep and you're going to be more aggressive and more agitated during the daytime, those are the type of things that are going to start setting you off. Okay, lack of sleep has also been connected to psychological disorders such as depression and bipolar disorder. And this is a catch-22 because your mood in the day-to-day can also affect your quality of sleep. So, to touch on the importance of sleep and how this affects your mood can affect how quickly you fall asleep and the quality of that sleep. So here's what that means. If you're agitated, if you're sleep deprived, and you're in a bad mood, and you find it hard to go to sleep, and you have this kind of insomnia cycle, you could be stuck in a feedback loop where your mood is not letting you get enough sleep, and then your sleep is putting you in a bad mood. That's why it's super important to get the right amount of sleep so that your mood is not affected negatively, and also you'll be as healthy as you can be without experiencing high blood pressure, that chronic hypertension, as well as elevated heart rates. Now, with that being said, is it hopeless? No. So here are some ways that you can improve your sleep. First, we're going to look at regulating your substance intake right before bed, okay? I have food and caffeine down there. Now, you have a bundle of nerves, a system of nerves in your stomach that some medical journals call your second brain. This is because those nerves can send signals to your brain that can affect your mood. That's why you've heard of this thing called hangry. When you're so hungry, it makes you angry. That's kind of a direct result of this stomach to brain connection, right? So when you're eating food, your stomach is going to tell your brain that it's time to wake up, time to be aroused. It's going to communicate with your brainstem that you need to be aroused, you need to be up, you might have to eat more food, okay? So definitely don't eat right before bed. Second is caffeine. Caffeine is a molecule that physically resembles melatonin and, in fact, fits into the melatonin receptors in your brain, blocking actual melatonin from fitting into those receptors. When melatonin gets into those receptors, it has the effect of suppressing some of the neurological responses in your brain and helping you slip into unconscious sleep time. Whereas caffeine will actually make you more aroused. Okay, it will stimulate those nerves, and you're going to be more aroused. Okay, daylight exposure. Daylight exposure is very important for your circadian rhythm, which we're going to touch on later. But some studies I read state that exposing yourself to daylight and getting exercise in the daylight will help you produce melatonin when you're back in dark spaces like your room and it's time to go to bed. Okay, temperature. It's important that you keep the temperature in your room at a cool level. If it's too hot for you, you're gonna find that it's hard for you to go to sleep. Okay, so you really want to keep your room cool. Okay, light levels. It is extremely important that you keep your room pitch black. If you sleep with a night light, you could be negatively affecting your sleep quality. Now back to that circadian rhythm. The circadian rhythm is basically your body's natural rhythm of sleep and wake, and it follows the change of light levels throughout the day. So as the sun starts to go down, your circadian rhythm is going to kick in, and you're going to start producing melatonin and all that stuff when it gets darker. Okay, but if you're not exposed to daylight, if you're in just a office with fluorescent lights all the time, your body's not going to know when it's supposed to be daytime or when it's supposed to be nighttime, and that's going to mess up when your body releases certain sleep chemicals or arousal chemicals. So it's important that you are changing your light levels throughout the day to match the time of day it is, so that you can go to sleep faster and stay asleep longer. Okay. Bed habits and association. So this is a big one. Some studies have found that if you do activities in your bed other than sleeping, such as doing homework, eating food, you're watching TV, and you're laying in your bed doing that, your body will associate your bed with those activities rather than sleeping. So it's important that you leave your bed only for sleeping. Don't do your homework in your bed. Don't eat in your bed. Don't watch TV while you're in your bed. And this, and your body will then associate your bed strictly with sleep. So every time you climb in your bed, your body will know, hey, time to go to sleep, okay? Now, a subject I didn't touch on briefly is this blue light, okay? So your electronics will release light in the blue wavelength, and that will affect, we talked about earlier, your suprachiasmatic nucleus. The blue light will specifically tell that SCN that it's daytime and that you're in the daylight, and it will tell that pineal gland not to release melatonin. So it's really important that you stay away from all blue light a couple hours, maybe an hour before bedtime. So that's going to conclude my presentation on how your sleep affects mood. Thanks so much, guys, for watching. I'll catch you next time.